listeners, I'm joined now by Nurlan Aliyev. Nurlan, thank you so much for being here with us on Talk Eastern Europe.
Thank you. Much appreciated. It's a pleasure to be here.
So we're going to talk about your latest publication, which is the book called Reassessing Russia's Security Policy. I think it's a very important topic, considering that Russia has become probably the most important security threat to the Western world. But before we go into maybe some of the details, I wanted to ask about what was behind the project. What were your aims for putting this book together? What do you hope readers and scholars will get from it?
Thanks. The main aim of the book the project was to respond questions, the main questions on evaluation of contemporary Russia's security policy, based on facts, academic research, findings of the research. So the book explains the theoretical and practical basis for the main concepts and methods of Russian historical and contemporary security policy. The main argument is that Russia's external security strategies are not new, but the asymmetric approach of a relatively weaker global power in the face of stronger competitors, for instance, United States, NATO, China, etc. In such a confrontation, the weaker party, as in the asymmetric, that's a classic form of the asymmetric war, the weaker party uses several, but not necessarily military, means and methods to overthrow a military and economically that's a superior adversary. One of the main distinguishing facets of the book is its intention to explain how Russia uses asymmetric approach in the strategic interaction of its conventional military. That's in strategy, not only tools, but in the strategy. And using the non-military, tools is not issue from the using the military conventional tools. In case of the Russian security policy, but the main issue is about the strategic asymmetry. So this book provides a detailed analysis of the evolution of the Russian security policy. It evaluates how far Russia's security policy is underpinned by strategic asymmetry, the acceptance by Russia of its interior military position, and the pursuit of its strategic aims through the application of a variety of methods, military and non-military, including the manipulation of public opinion, the use of economic leverage, and external security approach, known as Russia's hybrid war operations in the West, but Russians themselves, the Russian military elite, security elite called it as a asymmetric strategy, asymmetric approach. So in order to gain the advantage over a military and economically superior adversary, currently this is NATO and mainly United States. So the book discusses also how Russia's security policy has been and is being applied in specific cases, including the present war in Ukraine, the previous invasion as well, the Russian anti-satellite program, and Russia's contemporary Afghan policy. The aim of the book is to explain all of those cases based on the Russia's security approach. So it covers several of the main theories and methods of the Russian security policy. It discusses the tactics, operational and strategic level developments, and focuses on Russian security and foreign policy postures. It studies how these methods contribute to the implementation of Russia's security and foreign policies. Whether Russia's external security policy affected its foreign policies. It emphasized the necessity of asymmetry in the Russian security strategy. This is the book's main argument, and it runs through every chapter. It aims to guide the reader through the main arguments with an introduction that focuses on the context in which asymmetry applies.
Yeah.
A secondary argument states that asymmetric approaches are preferable for Russia, mainly because of its own weaknesses and shortcomings, specifically as it is military issues, the comparing with other great powers. So I can continue.
Yeah,
But
I think we'll get into some of the details. I hope of of this asymmetric approach, as you call it. But first, I wanted to ask a bit about your sources, how you got to the information. Was it difficult to get to the primary sources, especially since you're evaluating the Russian security
Mhm.
policies?
Uh, it was not easy, of course, but I started to collect it since 2014. Even the yes, since I mean the materials, and even the before I read a lot of books and
Mm,
historical books of the Russian military scholars in the not only Soviet period, contemporary period, and also the let's say the imperial period and during the Russian Empire, especially end of the 19th century,
mm,
beginning of the 20th century. And also they conducted some interviews with the experts from the Russia, from the West, from the countries, did field works in the Ukraine, for instance, and other post-Soviet countries, for instance, Georgia, etc., and Azerbaijan, Central Asian countries. The mainly it's based on extensive original research, including analysis of official documents and Russian official documents,
mm-hmm,
political and military speech, interviews, and reports, and considering the subject from the early 20th century, I can say in the end of the 19th century onwards, works, books, archive materials, articles, interviews of the Russian military security and political elite, both during the Soviet period and especially contemporary period,
mm,
and after 1991. Russian and Western scholars' works are used. Information, thoughts from expert interviews done between 2015 and 2020, let's say 23,
mm,
are
mm,
used. Also, the results of several surveys, not done by me, by other scholars, other, let's say, uh, research institutions on the Russian elite and the general public security thinking, which date between 1990s and 2023. I use the works of, for instance, Zimmerman, Krishtanovskaya, I don't know, the works of the Riveras, works of the Levada Institute,
mm,
etc.
mm-hmm,
So, and also I compare the data of the that's data comparisons of Russia, world and regional powers. For instance, the World Bank data, United Nations data, on, for instance, this is
mm,
CIPRI, right? CIPRI's data, and other the let's say military capabilities, and also human resources, economic resources, for instance, nuclear missile, let's say, capabilities, nuclear weapon capabilities, etc. Military expenditures, for instance, the total number of nuclear weapons, world development indicators, and human development index data are compared in order to show the Russia's, let's say, capabilities.
wow, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the, at the end of each chapter is quite a lot of sources that you are using. So you definitely, I think you did a ton of research on this to put the
Mhm.
book together. I wanted to ask because the title is Reassessing Russia's Security Policy, so it's kind of, means to look at it. And maybe before we reassess the current, I wanted to ask about like historically, how would you characterize the differences, if any, or how has Russia's security policy evolved from the Soviet times?
Mhm.
What would you say if there are any differences between the Soviet approach versus Russia's approach today?
Mhm. Thank you. One of the chapters, it's called of the book. It's called "The Soviet Legacy of Russia's Security Policy," and as in its title, it analyzes how the Soviet, let's say, experiences, Soviet legacy that play a role in Russia's contemporary security policy. It analyzes how similar non-military methods and approaches in security policy were used during the Soviet Union and presents the functions of these methods. The goal of this chapter was to explain why, how, and what kind of asymmetric approaches were used by the Soviet Union and how their legacies influence contemporary Russia's security policy. Generally speaking, Soviet legacy is huge, that's it, tangible in contemporary Russia's security policy. The main difference is about, I think, the ideology, because during the Soviet Union, at least in official documents, in speech, etc., they try to justify everything in military strategy with the official ideology and the Marxism. For instance, one of the book published by the Soviets military elite, it's called The Strategy, and there are almost in every chapter started with the ideology, Marxism-Leninism, ended with it, and every, let's say, activities, let's say, goals justified with the ideology. But contemporary Russia, you could not find it. There are several, let's say, discussion about the role of influences of the ideology, for instance, I don't know, Eurasianism, etc., etc. But in military, let's say, affairs, I couldn't find it. There are for instance, in the general academy, there are some courses about the Eurasianism, especially before it was, for instance, there are the reports that Dugin conducted some lectures that's in the Academy of the General Staff. It is possible, yes, but in the official documents, military thinking, you could not find the ideology in contemporary Russia. I mean, such kind of ideology as it was during the Soviet Union. But of course, other ways, experiences used almost in all, let's say, activities, you could find such kind of Soviet legacies. But of course, it is, let's say, they are modified. That's adapted, that's the calls of the challenge of the nowadays. And of course, let's say, internet, new technologies.
Right.
But even, for instance, during the Soviet Union, let's say, they actively used the so-called cryptography. We can call it such kind of that's ancestor of the contemporary cyber warfare and the Russian cyber warfare. So information warfare. Just imagine from the very beginning of the not Soviet Union, in the Bolsheviks, I mean, before the establishment of the Soviet Union, in 1917, 1918, one of the main divisions of the Soviet, let's say, intelligence services, it's called the Disinform Bureau, and the Department on the Disinformation. I used several their activities, for instance, how they conduct the information warfare against Poland, for instance, other allies, not allies, that's adversaries, and also there's some even the countries in the Asia, for instance, against Afghanistan, for instance. I mean, in 1920s, 1930s, and also during the Cold War against the United States, for instance, how they used such kind of cryptography to let's say, to break the codes in order to get classified information, high-level decision makers of the United States, etc. So if briefly put it, there are the huge legacy of the Soviet security policy, so especially Soviet, let's say, experiences, Second World War, in contemporary Russia's security thinking and generally the military and security.
So I mean, hybrid tactics. I guess there were being already used during the Soviet times, but it seems now that, as you mentioned, I guess what they call asymmetric tactics. It's much more widespread. Can you talk a bit more about the hybrid tactics and how it fits into the Russians' security and foreign policy that it's undertaking today, especially as against its so-called adversaries, which most likely is the West and the U.S.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. Yes, actually, Russia's that I should mention about it, put it. They do not use such a terminology. They use it. They use the hybrid war when they describe the threats or operations from the West to Russia.
Ah, okay.
When their response, I mean, how they explain it, it should be asymmetric. In military, they call it non-linear warfare. But in the using the when they discussed about the asymmetric approach, asymmetric strategy, it's not only about the non-military, let's say, tools. Okay, it's not only about information warfare. I don't know, cyber warfare, etc., etc. And the non-kinetic methods. They are just such kind of substitute to the military activities. Okay, but in military activities, they emphasize to use of the asymmetric strategy. So because of how they explain it, since the end of the Soviet Union, for instance, there was published the collective book of the Russian military elite. It is called the Taktika. So there you can find such kind of explanation of non-linear military activities, and let's say roots of it as a concept was created in the 1930s by the early Soviet military elite, such as the Trandafilov, Iserson, Tukhachevsky, and they created such kind of a concept. And in the 1930s, all of the, let's say, authors of that concept were almost killed or arrested during the purge by Stalin among the military elite. And their works were forgotten. And again, after the start of the Second World War, around 1942, they remembered about them, and they started to use to some extent, let's say. And later in 1970s, the head of the general staff, Ogorkov, Soviet Union, the general staff, used such kind of, not that's a same, but the similar approach. And again, let's say since the end of the Soviet Union, Russian military elite started to discuss such kind of approach. Almost all of them, for instance, General Gareyev's work, you could find it, Kokoshin's work. And one of the issues, let's say, officially they started asymmetric, let's say, a response. There was such kind of strategy in the early 1980s during the Andropov, in response to the Reagan so-called Star War concepts. They created such kind of group where the military generals and also the representatives of the Academy of the Soviet Science participated, and it was headed by the academician Velikhov. It was called the Group of Velikhov, and their concept officially called asymmetric response. Okay, and again, after the Soviet Union first years, they remembered all about them, and several Soviet, Russian scholars, military scholars, representatives of the military elite started to use to write several works on it. And there was also one of the not Soviets. He was emigre, let's say, military scholar, Messner, and his works, let's say, close such kind of hybrid warfare
Mm-hmm.
activities.
Mm-hmm.
Because of, he also mentioned about use of the uh, let's say conventional military tools together with let's say insurgent groups in frame of one military operations, and also he emphasized about the role of propaganda, let's say information warfare, even the psychological warfare.
Mm-hmm.
So let's say all of them started to mention by contemporary Russian elites. For instance, during the special 2000s, uh, in the one of the first official documents of the Russian Defense Ministry, during the Minister of Ivanov, they published the white paper of the Minister of Defense, and there you can find the several, let's say, let's say, note reference to the asymmetric strategies, asymmetric need for apply to asymmetric strategies.
Hmm.
And also the in 2006, in his official speech in the Duma or Senate, I don't remember exactly, Putin stated first time that the Russia's response to the security threats should be smart and asymmetric, because
Mm-hmm.
explained that we should not repeat Soviet mistakes in order to spend more budget on the armories, etc. So we should use asymmetric approach, and so far they continued on it, and there were published. There are a lot of that's works, but one of the, let's say, we can call the militarily scholar works, published several articles by the Chekhinov, Bagdasarov, who are the, let's say, scholars of the General Staff, Russian General Staff Academy, and they explain the Russia's vision. For instance, one of their work and what they offer, we could find the Russia's activities. I mean, in Ukraine. Yeah, I mean, in current war. So my point is, and I try to explain it in the book as well. So yeah, it's called the hybrid war, Russia's hybrid warfare approach, etc. But I think the main issue for Russia is not about how it's called, and they called it the asymmetric approach. Or non-military methods, etc.
Mm-hmm.
But main issue is about the affordability of tools. They can use the several tools, but the main issue for Russian case, it is the adversary. I mean the strength of the adversary, and the applicable, affordable tools.
Mm-hmm.
For instance, they will use against NATO mainly non-kinetic, let's say, tools, because of they do not want to clash directly with the NATO because of they understand their weaknesses. But in case of, for instance, Ukraine, they will use mainly, and they use generally
Right.
military power,
Yeah.
right? So it depends. Again, in such a comparison, we can see the, let's say, strategic asymmetry. So the point of my research, my book, is also about it.
Mm-hmm. And I wanted to ask, I mean, you mentioned like that during the Soviet times, it was definitely tied to ideology, the aims of Soviet foreign and security policy.
Yeah.
What would you, I mean, from what I gather in the book, I mean, and would you agree with this? Basically, the aim of Russia's foreign and security policy now is to basically, limit the power of the West, to promote a kind of multipolar world rather than unipolar world. And then that also leads to me a question about China. What do you think, how Russia sees the role of China in its security and foreign policy?
Thank you. It is very interesting regarding the multipolarity. That's Russia's wish
Mm-hmm.
for the multipolarity. It is not new again. It started in 19, we can see around 19, that's in 95, 1996, somewhere where, and the main, let's say, that's promoter of such thoughts was Primakov. Yevgeny Primakov, former Soviet, let's say, elite, representative of Soviet elite, and after the breakup of the Soviet Union, he worked in several contemporary Russian ministries. I'm the head of the intelligence, foreign intelligence, Sever, and also the foreign minister and prime minister. So when he was appointed by Yeltsin, the foreign minister, he started to, let's say, in his speech, in his works, even he writes several articles, and in his books you can find about it, about the need for Russia, for the how the multipolarity can be good for Russia. And his main purpose was not about the Russia should go to the, let's say, enmity with the West. No. His point was that because of the Russia is weaker, I'm just trying to simplify.
Sure.
Because of the Russia is weaker, Russia and the but Russia has, let's say, resources, perspective for the development, and the world and the international system is changing, and it's not possible that the international system always will have the unipolarity as it was in the 1990s, and the one superpower, United States, and in the system. So Russia should, let's say, prepare for the, let's say, good times, good days. But Russia, of course, should keep the good relations, develop the relations with the West, but at the same time, with the other, let's say, prospective centers of the world, such as the, for instance, Brazil, China, India, Middle East, etc. So we can call it this such kind of some post-Soviet countries now it's called balancing foreign policy or multi-vector Russian. But it was indeed about the multipolarity, and Primakov also mentioned about it. So what happened? I like the one of the Russian scholars explanation on the Moscow's expectations on multipolarity. Fyodor Lukyanov. He in 2018, 18 or 19, in his interview, or perhaps interview, I think, recognized that it is not the multipolar order that was expected by Russia. So how it explained it, I would like, let's say, to quote, use his quotation, the multipolar world to which we really aspired turned out to be in reality, well, let's say, not quite as pleasant as we thought. It is rather a chaotic development of events. These are non-linear processes, and this is one of the illusions of world leaders. I mean large countries of the world, which a lot depends on them. Rather how? Much depends on them, but now much less depends on them than before. Therefore, we are not yet ready for a multipolar world. So, in his speech, of course, he, let's say, referred to the leaders of the Russia, to Putin. But because of the such kind of Ethiopian language he used, as it is popular in the post-Soviet, almost all post-Soviet countries. So This explanation, I think, is good and explain the yes, why Russia wanted it because of the especially since the 2000s after the Putin's let's say Putin's presidency, and especially after the Russia, let's say prices of the oil has increased in 2000 around 3 4, and Russia, let's say, started uh, to economically, let's say, developed because of the 1990s. The economic situation was horrible, and weak but great power. I mean, in 2000s, Russia can't the huge territories, resources, and also the conventional military power was even weaker than now, but they had the nuclear weapons.
Mm-hmm.
So, and of course, legacy of the Soviet Union, grievances on the, let's say, results of the, let's say, Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the breakup of the Soviet Union, loss of the former colonies. And it was also the, let's say, popular such kind of thought among the society, among the majority of society,
Right.
such kind of humiliating defeat by the West, as they, let's say, and especially the, let's say, such kind of far right, not, let's say, right groups in Russia, let's say, propagated, and also the communists. And after 2005, Putin also, let's say, use it as a, I mean, the Putin government use it as a part of the state propaganda. So, yeah, let's say, great power status was and is currently, let's say, one of the main issue. And in order to find their place in the such kind of multipolar world, they will have such kind of more maneuvering capabilities because of there is currently. I mean, I started to discuss from the 2000s, but currently we are in. There are the China, there are the United
Right.
States, and their main purpose, at least to the start of the 2022, was to maneuver between the China and the United States.
Mm.
I think currently, of course, the dependencies of the Russia on China increased already, and it is increasing, and I am afraid it will be even after the end of the war. But anyway, it's also the, let's say, popular thought among the Russian elite, military and also political elite, to try to, let's say, maneuver between the Washington and Beijing, mainly, and in order to get more benefit from both of them. Probably after the end of war, we will be able to see such kind of more, let's say, Russia's move towards such, let's say, or at least intentions toward the, such kind of maneuver. But I think it will be difficult than it was before 2022 because of the dependence on China has already increased. China, let's say, economic involvement in the former Soviet republics, especially in CIS countries, they are important for Russia because of Russia declared them such kind of legitimate sphere of the interest. And the Chinese economic involvement increased in the Central Asia, already in Caucasus, okay?
Yeah.
Even in Ukraine, before the war, they participated in, and probably after the war they will. Of course, Russia has, and will have such kind of grievances, but I think Russia will not have such kind of, let's say, option to openly resist to, let's say, China's increasing involvement.
Interesting.
And yes, and I think they already, I think, tried to manage it somehow, especially in Central Asia. We can say since the 2000, let's say 2017, 2018, and probably in the Caucasus as well. But generally, Russia, even before the war, it was obvious. Russia's, let's say, power projection in the former Soviet, let's say, sphere, so former Soviet republics, started to decrease. We could see it in the war, for instance, in between Armenia and Azerbaijan in 2020, and several other cases. Because of currently, this is also let's say, one of the results of the multipolarity. Currently, Russia, let's say, faced not only one, let's say, competitor, West, and also China. And probably in the coming years, there will be also the India. After 10 years, perhaps 15 years, because of, especially in Central Asia, India also has huge interest, let's say, to access to the resources of the Caspian Basin and also the market. So, yeah, the Russia, China, let's say, such a situation.
Interesting, yes.
Yeah, and so multipolarity, let's say, already started influence Russia's power projection, not only in the several parts of the world, as any great power should has, and even in its, let's say, borders and let's say, republics, which Moscow considers as it is legitimate, so-called legitimate sphere of interest.
Right. I wanted to ask finally about maybe what you think might happen next, because we've seen that Russia has converted basically its economy to a war economy. So as an expert on Russian security and knowing the internal thinking behind it, do you see that Russia is preparing for broader conflict with the West? Or is it, or do you actually see that that there's going to be a chance in the next year or so that the war in Ukraine will actually come to an end, and there will be some sort of I don't know, at least first steps in between the West and Russia in try to normalize the situation?
Thank you. I think for sure there are already preparations started. For instance, establishment of the new military districts and the Leningrad, and also. So what does it mean? It is they mainly concern, let's say, the threats from the Western, mainly, let's say, from the Western geography. It means from the NATO, right? And also that's what, especially after the war, they will, and also because of their, let's say, military production already started, and it will be difficult to stop it, let's say, to immediately after the end of the war,
right?
Because of, you understand, this is a production, because of it's not only production, it's about the companies, it's about the budget, it's about the salaries of the huge number of the people, specialists, let's say, work there in such productions, the military production. So they will continue it, and but I don't think so about the Russia's military operations against NATO member states. At least Of course, we don't know,
Yeah.
especially if it's about international security. But I am not sure, but I am sure that Russia will continue such kind of spalling activities. For instance, such kind of information warfare or
Hmm.
propaganda issues to support such confrontation within the Western societies, using the propaganda or support some groups perhaps. Uh, and also for instance, in the uh, Baltic Sea, Arctic Ocean, and North Sea. They already started, and they will continue such kind of sabotage,
Mm.
if not sabotage, but that's surveillance activities using the, for instance, their research vessel or research fleet. It's also, uh, let's say, formed in the Western media as a spy
Hmm.
fleet, and they do such activities as well. So they may continue such activities. They will strengthen, let's say, military force. I think in Belarus, in Kaliningrad, they already started to call it such kind of regional security architecture. Yes,
Hmm.
regional security architecture. Yes, and but direct activities. I mean, to act, for instance, to attack other Baltic countries, Poland, or any other NATO member states. Uh, the probability, I think, the more or less than the activities I mentioned. I mean, such kind of,
Hmm. Hmm.
yes, non-kinetic activities. But I think problems, there are the more chance that the former Soviet republics, CIS countries,
Mm.
may have, such as especially rich countries such as Kazakhstan, Azerbaijan, and also the Uzbekistan. You
Mm.
know, probably not the, let's say, military operations to occupy, etc. But Russia's, let's say, pressure will increase over those countries, and let's say because of to sell their arms,
Hmm.
and also they to get more economic benefits from those countries.
Interesting. Well, we'll see. Yeah, definitely. What will happen next? But Nurlan, thank you so much for helping us navigate this, this sphere
You,
of Russia's security policy. I think we learned a lot, and appreciate
definitely.
you being here with us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My pleasure to be here. Thanks so much.